I'm trying to be a real book YouTuber and do my video in front of my bookshelf. Is it working, guys? Am I doing it? Hi guys, it's Katie. Welcome back to my channel. I have not had the pleasure of doing like a year-end wrap-up video ever for my reading, and I watch these so much, like just people's reading year in general and like what they read, what they liked, what they didn't like, and so I'm really excited to do one for you guys because like I said, I watch these all the time. This is basically all I've been watching for the past like 4 or 5 days is what people read this year. So I'm going to take you through what I read this year and then tell you a little bit about how I felt about what I read this year, and then also tell you kind of what my plans are for next year and what I want to read next year. I literally have notes. I went through my GOODREADS and did this all by hand. I know some people use really cool apps, like I think Fable is one of them, or I don't know. There's another app that like keeps track of your reading and like gives you stats and stuff at the end of the year. I'm not that cool. I didn't use that, so I had to do this all by hand, and honestly it was like very interesting to go through and see what I read this year. So starting us off, I will just tell you how many books I read this year. I read 35 books and my goal for the year was only 20. Usually I read like pretty ferociously, like I'd say 35, like around 30, between 20 and 30 is like my normal. 35 is like pretty good for only shooting for 20. In years past I've shot for 50 and read 50, and like honestly would like to see my reading up in the like 50 mark, but I had a really stressful year with a lot of like crazy stuff happen, so it makes sense that I didn't have a ton of time for reading. I did read one book a month every single month this year, and so at least doing that makes me happy. There were some months I read 5 books, some months I only read 1 book, so it was like really like all over the place. I read 8 5-star books, 8 4-star books, 8 3-star books. 8 is like just repeating a lot here. And then 2 2-star or less books. I think they were both 2 stars. And then I DNF'd 2 books. I'm gonna tell you what my favorite series and favorites were for the year first, and then we'll get into what my ratings look like, what books I rated what. Me bringing over my stack of books. Okay, so for my favorite fantasy reads, I am a read mostly fantasy and romance. I'm like, that's what I mainly take in. This year I feel like I read more romance than fantasy, which is pretty crazy because I would say that's not very normal for me. I'm more of a fantasy reader than a romance reader, but this year I guess I just needed to escape my life. I'm gonna start with my favorite fantasy reads. This year my favorite fantasy reads were Red Rising by Pierce Brown. This is technically a sci-fi, but I will put fantasy and sci-fi together, like high fantasy and sci-fi together. This book, I mean, can you see? It changed my life. I picked this for our book club because I saw Haley Pham reading this, and I hadn't seen her pick up a lot of high fantasy and sci-fi, so I was like, if she's really enjoying this, I feel like I could probably pick it up and enjoy it because I love fantasy and sci-fi and just like really in-depth crazy stories. And when I'd heard it was kind of like the Hunger Games, we were going through a Hunger Games renaissance, and I was like, this sounds so good. I rated this book 5 stars. Obviously it's like my favorite of the year. I still think about this book every day. I'm currently reading Golden Sun. I haven't finished it, but that's not the book's fault. I had moved when I started the second book and then ended up not being able to read, so I just like fall off of it, and like it wasn't the book's fault, it was my fault, you know, one of those situations. But yeah, Red Rising, literally one of my favorite books I've probably ever read. It just really makes you think, and I highly recommend if you want to get into sci-fi or you want to get into fantasy, Red Rising by Pierce Brown, chef's kiss. My other favorite fantasy that I read this year, this is a recent read for me, Trust in the Emerald Sea by Brandon Sanderson. I signed up for Brandon's secret projects and got all 4 of them in the mail. This was the first one he delivered, and I didn't even end up reading it until November, which is pretty crazy. My book club read it, and I feel like everyone across the board really loved this book. It is gorgeous, like, God, I'm just so obsessed with it. And the story inside is just as beautiful on the outside. It falls into the cozy fantasy range, but because it's written by Brandon, it's not so cozy. It's very funny, like so funny. I laughed. I was freaking dying laughing through this entire book. It's very funny, very cute. It's written in like a Princess Bride-y style, and I really loved that. I've never like really been interested in the Princess Bride, so I wasn't sure how that would work for me, and this worked so well for me. It ties up so well. The main character has such a great arc. He wrote this book for his wife as a gift for her, and you can see kind of his wife's imprint on the book, and like how him writing for her changed the way he wrote, and that is like really sweet to me, and I just think it's like the most romantic thing ever that he wrote a book for his freaking wife. Super, super good. Highly recommend. Again, if you've never been into Brandon, there were a couple girls in my book club that had never read Brandon's books before, and they read this and were like, whoa, this is like so weird. This is not what I pictured. This is by no means what he usually writes. It is an amazing, great work of fiction, but it is not his normal style. So if you're just getting into Brandon and you read this, you might be a little bit confused, because this, again, is not his normal voice, his normal style, but it is still a really good book. So if you want to get into Brandon, pick it up, knowing it's not usually how he writes, but it is a very good book. I also rated this book 5 stars. That's my favorite. Okay, next we're gonna do my favorite romance of the year, which I've had like the same favorite romance author every year for the past several years, and so I don't think anyone's gonna be surprised when I pick this up and say, oh my god, I love this, because I literally have another video just on one of this author's books on my channel, and that is Love Theoretically by Ali Hazelwood. This was my favorite romance of the year. I love Ali Hazelwood. She is my queen, a legend, the best. I don't know what else to say. She writes fanficky books that aren't fanfic. I don't know if that makes sense, but they have you kicking your feet screaming. They're very tropey, but in the best way. They're like done in different ways and fun and just, oh, so good. So good. Could talk about her all day for the rest of my life. This book was amazing. She does like these like science-y romances. This book is about 2 physicists. Our main character, I think her name is Elsie. Elsie is a theoretical physicist. Literally so iconic, so good. All of it was cute. She's fake dating his brother. She doesn't know who he is. Like, it's just like this whole thing. Like, I feel like I'm not describing it well enough, but that's not really what the video is about, okay? The video is about recapping my reading. So I know you're not getting a great explanation of this book, but I promise it's worth reading, so read it. Favorite series. I'm gonna go by the order that I read them, like what became my favorite first, and that is going to be first. Also, I'm so sorry. These books do not match at all. Like, they're so ugly. It like is such an eyesore on my shelf. Hellbent. I have Little Mass Market. And Ninth House by Leigh Bardugo. If you know me, you know that I am a Leigh Bardugo slut, okay? I love Leigh Bardugo. She's so great. Everything she makes is literal perfection. I love, well, not everything she makes. The Shadow and Bone trilogy, like, it's there, okay? I'm not saying it's amazing, but it's there. But Six of Crows and Crooked Kingdom are my favorite books of all time, probably. Or some of my favorite books of all time. And my book club for our first month, we read Ninth House, and it was literally fantastic. It was amazing. This is such a great, dark, urban fantasy, Yale, dark academia. Like, it's just so good. And of course, because she's Leigh Bardugo, she gives everybody this tragic, beautiful backstory that's so intricately woven and affects every aspect of their character. And you really see how they develop and grow, and like, it's just seriously so good. And then the second book came out this year, which was Hellbent, and it delivered everything I wanted it to deliver. It is a slow burn, slow burn, slow burn, and it is delivered just so perfectly. I rated both of these books 5 stars. I feel like as of lately, I have not been rating whole series 5 stars like I once did. So the fact that I rated both of these 5 stars, I think that says a lot. Both of these books on their own are iconic works of fiction. I just love Leigh, and I can't wait for The Familiar to come out this year. That is like one of my most anticipated reads. But anyways, yeah, cannot wait. These were 5 stars, really great series. Can't wait to see where she goes next. The other series that I loved that I will never shut up about, not all of these I rated 5 stars. I actually only rated one of them 5 stars, but that is, I actually do know the name of the series. It's a Curse for True Love series. I think, I could be wrong, but it's Once Upon a Broken Heart, The Ballad of Never After, and A Curse for True Love. I read Once Upon a Broken Heart, and I only rated it 4 stars, I think. And I was like, yeah, it's good, but I don't know. I was like excited, and like when this book ended, I really wanted to know what happened next. So I picked up this book, and this was a 5-star read for me. I think this was my first 5-star read of the year. And I specifically read these because Carrie Can Read had read them. And when she finished the second one, there was like such a cliffhanger that she like freaked out, could not handle her life. And I was like, I need to experience whatever that is for myself. So I read them both. I read them in like a couple days, I want to say, super fast. And then the last one came out this just a few months ago, not that long ago, I think in November. And although it was a great book, it didn't deliver on all the things I wanted it to deliver, which is sad for me. And I think anyone that's read it can agree. I think she just built up a lot in these two books that needed to be done perfectly in the last one. And no matter what she would have done, I think somebody would have been unhappy. And I mean, they turned out great. They wrapped up fine. Everything turned out the way we wanted it to. I just feel like I didn't get the proper, like, sink your teeth into it that I wanted to. But this is a 5-star series for me, and I would recommend to anyone who's wanting to get into fantasy and has never read fantasy. These are YA, I think, and they're very palatable. There's a like enemies to lovers. There's a slow burn. It's like fantasy, and it feels like a fairy tale, and I could go on and on for days, but a very great series. I highly, highly recommend if you're looking to get into fantasy and you haven't read it before. I'm just gonna list you the books that I read this year that were 5 stars. I don't have all of these on me, but my 5-star books this year, I can't believe I only read 8. It like makes me sad. Like I feel like there should be more than that. They were Trust of the Emerald Sea, Red Rising, Love Theoretically, Binding 13 by Chloe Walsh, Ninth House by Leigh Bardugo, Hellbent by Leigh Bardugo, the Lore series. I read Lore Olympus, the graphic novels. I think I read 4 or 5 of the volumes this year, and I rated them all 5 stars. I love that series. I haven't kept up with it since like I finished up to where she had published, and this was like a couple months ago. She took a long break, was on long break when I finished what she had written so far. And I just love the series. I love the artwork. The art style is so freaking cute. And if you've never gotten into graphic novels before, it's a great way to jump into it because it's completely free online. I read it all, I think on Webtoon. And then the last 5-star read was Ballad of Never After, which I just talked about when I was telling you about my favorite series. My 4-star books this year, I think I have some of them here. So I don't have a lot of them with me, but one of them was Once Upon a Broken Heart, obviously, which I already talked to you guys about. A Curse for True Love as a 4-star book this year. Attachments by Rainbow Rowell. I've read Rainbow Rowell's The Fangirl and loved it. Literally one of my favorite books of all time. I wanted to read like some YA that was like kind of like historical cornerstones of the YA genre, and Fangirl's one of them. I had been interested in Attachments for a while. I tried to listen to the audiobook and I did not like the narrator, so then I read the physical book, and this was just very cute. It was only a 4-star for me, but I mean, it's a really good book. I still highly recommend these books. The books I rate 4 stars, they just didn't have that 5-star feeling, you know, but like they're still very, very good. And Attachments, highly recommend. I love everything Rainbow Rowell writes. I kind of want to read Carry On. Tell me in the comments if I'm crazy. I read the entire Summer I Turned Pretty trilogy. I rated all 4 books, or 3 books, 4 stars. I might be wrong about the last book though, because the last book, I don't know, now after thinking about it, I don't know if it's really worth 4 stars or not, but I rated them all 4 stars. They were a good read. I can see why young girls relate so much with the characters and love these books so much. They're very sweet. And the new audiobooks are great. I physically read this one, and then I went back and forth between the other 2. Physical book, audiobook, and the audiobooks are narrated by the characters from the show, so that's like super, super cool. But yeah, these are good. I highly recommend if you haven't read them yet. They're just a good little fun time, no pressure. The next book that I rated 4 stars is Fourth Wing by Rebecca Yarros. I am a high fantasy reader, so when I read Fourth Wing, I feel like a lot of people, I actually bought this before it had any hype. I saw it at Target, I saw the sprayed edges, and I just saw how much money went into this, and I was getting so many ads on Facebook and Instagram and TikTok, and I was like, someone is putting a lot of money into this, why? Basically, and so I decided to pick it up and read it. When I did read it though, I had already seen people saying that loved high fantasy, saying it was like romantasy and a joke, and I was like, look, I'm gonna go into this with the thought that like, if it is romantasy and it's a joke, whatever, who cares, I'm just here to have a good time. And I think because I went into it with such low expectation and not expecting it to be like a crazy work of fiction or like Brandon Sanderson level fantasy, I had a good time and ended up rating it 4 stars. That being said, I do see all the problems with it, and I see why high fantasy readers do not love this book. As someone who loves romance and loves high fantasy, I can kind of see the merit here, but also I didn't even like the romance in this book. Honestly, like, let's be real here. I just like the dragons. Like, that's all I cared about was the dragons. I feel like Xaden and Violet, I don't know. I just felt like it was too fast, too much. I don't know how I feel about it, but I rated it 4 stars. It was still a fun time. I had fun. I read this while I was at a funeral. And it took my mind off the funeral, so I feel like it did its job. I feel like it's worthy of its 4 stars, okay? The last book I rated 4 stars this year was Blood Marked by Tracy Dion. Okay, funny story about Blood Marked. I think I have a reading vlog up reading these books. I read Legendborn and then I read Blood Marked. Legendborn, I hated. I really did not like it. I had a lot of problems with it, which I think I go into when I'm reading in the reading vlog. Then I picked up Blood Marked, and this is when the story actually got interesting to me. I feel like there is a love triangle in this, and like you don't know who she's gonna end up with, but the more interesting leg of the love triangle happens in this book, and you're like, wait, if all the books had just been written with this character, we would have had way more fun. He's got depth and like a different spin to him. I don't know what to say, but like when the second leg of the love triangle hit, I was like, oh, here's all the interesting stuff. The first guy, I mean, people say you don't know who she's gonna end up with, which in a way I'm like, yeah, because you think she has to end up with the certain leg of the love triangle. But then at the same time, like she wrote the first guy in such a way that it's like, yeah, he's not as interesting, he's not as fun, he's not as cool. The chemistry isn't there. So it's like obviously guy 2, even though guy 1 makes more sense, guy 2 is the more interesting one, if that makes sense. But this book, the romance isn't the only thing that progressed in this book. I feel like I learned more about their world, and I feel like characters got more agency and depth to them. The first book, I didn't feel like I had that, or the characters were acting weirdly in a way that I don't feel like I would act if I was in the same position. So Legendborn I didn't super love, but if you can push through Blood Marked, I like devoured this. I loved it so much, and I rated it 4 stars. So moving on, talking about the books I rated 3 stars. I only have a couple of them here with me, and a lot of them were very disappointing. We're going to talk about Legendborn first because I just mentioned it to you guys. Legendborn was 3 stars. I just kind of told you why, so I'm not gonna go deep into that, but I was bummed. There were elements of it that I really liked and parts where I was like, okay, I get why people like it, but there was also a lot of things that I didn't super love. So Legendborn, 3 stars. Carball by Stephanie Garber. I literally bought this book and I said, I'm gonna read this just so that I could read the Once Upon a Broken Heart trilogy. Read this, and there's a lot of vibes in here, but there's not a lot of plot, and sometimes I can get behind that, but a lot of times I'm like, where's the backstory? I need somebody to explain things to me. And Caraval just kind of like is a ride you're on and it's happening and you don't really know why it's happening or like how it's happening, and then you get to the end and they're like, yep, and that's it. Crazy, huh? And you're like, yeah, pretty crazy. So didn't super love that, and after reading this and getting to the end, I was like, I think that I can just read The Ballad of Never After and Once Upon a Broken Heart. I feel like I could read those books without ever finishing the Caraval series, and that's what I did. I did finish Caraval, but I did not keep going. Next book I rated 3 stars is a really sad one because this was like one of my most anticipated reads for this year. I follow the author on Instagram, and she's like a big, like, I don't know, like somebody that I look up to a lot, and I've read a lot of her other books and loved them, and that is Alexandra Bracken's Silver in the Bone. I loved Lore, okay? When she wrote Lore and it was a standalone, when I was reading it, it had everything that I loved about her writing from other books, but it was only a standalone, and I feel like it could have been more books if she just really got what she needed to get out of it, and I was bummed. So when I heard Silver was being written and put out this year, I was so excited. I had been following her journey, writing it and publishing it, bought it the day it released, so excited, and I trudged through this. I read this on the Kindle. It was the first book I read on the Kindle, which I love the Kindle. It's not the Kindle's fault. But this was just so long and so just not what I thought it was gonna be. It's touted as like a enemies to lovers, Indiana Jones, go on an adventure and find buried treasure situation. And you are on an adventure for like a couple, maybe the first 100 pages, and the rest of the book you spend literally in the same location the whole time with the same people. You're not traveling around, it's not Indiana Jonesing, and like all the things they need to figure out are getting figured out up here, not out here. So it's not very adventurous. It feels like you're just kind of stuck in the same spot, and I didn't really buy the chemistry or like the character relationships. Like usually Alexandra Bracken writes amazing found family, and I was not getting that from this. I was like, have I just outgrown her? No, because I really loved Lore, and I read that like not that long ago, so I was really bummed when this was only a 3-star for me, and I definitely will not be carrying on with the series. When I finish a book and it's gonna be part of a series and I have no desire to keep going, that's how I know that this is like not for me, and that's how I felt about Silver and the Bone. So unfortunately, will not be going on into 2024 with them. Other books I rated 3 stars. Flawless, Heartless, and Powerless from the Chestnut Springs series, which honestly that might be too gratuitous of a number. 3 stars. I kind of hate those books. Not even kind of, really. Divine Rivals. I rated Divine Rivals 3 stars. I feel like that's going to be a controversial opinion. I feel like some people are going to be coming for me, but there were just things with it that didn't make sense. In the end of that book, the relationship in the end of that book, as a person who, I'm not even going to spoil it. I'm not going to spoil it, but I couldn't get into it. I didn't super love it. And then the last book that I rated 3 stars was A Lady's Guide to Fortune Hunting, which was just fine. I didn't have any negative or positive like feelings about it. It was just like, it was what it was. Okay, now the 2 books that I rated 2 stars were Behind the Net, which I thought was disgusting, and I'm reading it in my Oregon vlog, and you can hear all about my thoughts in those vlogs. But basically, the man is choking his chicken, so to speak, in another room, and she can hear him saying her name through the wall. And I just don't understand how anyone could ever find that attractive or fun. And I've never, I just couldn't, there was too much behind the net that made no sense. The characters barely knew each other. There was like hardly any on-page chemistry. It was just weird, and I don't really know why that book took off this year in the way that it did. I don't get it. The other book that I rated 2 stars is actually the most recent book that I finished reading, and that's There's Something About Mary by Cody Hall. The thing about this is there is really nothing about Mary. Like, I don't even know what Mary's personality is. What is there about Mary? Fuck if I know. Not something. I can tell you that right now, because nothing is going on with this girl in this book. I felt like this book had almost no Christmas elements. The relationship had no chemistry. Lots of weird things happened. There was like a side plot at the end that like took a real like FBI route that I was like not expecting. I thought we were about to step into a mafia romance for a second, but then it like very quickly resolved in a very strange way. I don't know. 2 stars. I didn't really super love her. Sorry, Cody Hall. I also DNF'd 2 books this year. The first book I DNF'd was actually the first book I read this year, which was Twisted Games by Anna Huang. I don't really understand how anyone reads that book and can read the male POV and not feel like, I don't know, objectified. I just feel like they're a little bit too crazy, too chaotic, and the guys are way too into the girls too early, which kills your attention and the fun part. Maybe this is really toxic of me to say, but I think I only like 1 POV romances. When you have both POVs, except for in Something About Mary, I will give Cody Hall that. When you have 2 POVs, usually like it removes part of the magic for me, the excitement of like figuring out if someone likes someone or not. And what does he think? We don't know, because he hasn't said anything. Like, when you give us both sides, now I know what he thinks, so I'm not as excited. I don't know if that makes sense. So I did end up DNFing Twisted Games. Was not a big fan of it. And then I also DNF'd Kiss the Girl by Zoraida Cordova. One of my favorite authors posted this book and said that it was amazing, and I read it, and I could not get into this to save my life. I want to say I was deep into this book. Like, we're saying like halfway point, and I was like, I still don't care about him, and I still don't care about her, and I still don't care about anyone, so like I can't keep doing this. And yeah, I wouldn't recommend. It's a Little Mermaid retelling very loosely. They're like pop stars, and her name's Ariel. That's really the only, and they have a dad that like takes care of them, and she has a bunch of sisters, but that's really it. There's nothing else in here that really gives The Little Mermaid. Not super into it. So, all right, reading plans for next year. I really want to read more fantasy next year and some big books that scare me. I don't know what, all the books next to me just fell down. I don't know what those big books will be that I read next year, but I don't know. I want to read bigger books. I really want to finish the Mistborn series. I'm on the last book and just need to get the last chunk done. Mistborn Era 1, that is. So that would be Hero of Ages that I need to finish. And then I also want to finish reading Red Rising, which is already on my radar. I'm going to dive right back into Golden Sun after I read my book club book for this month, which is Dance of Thieves by Mary E. Pearson. I also really want to read Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow, Frugal Wizard's Handbook by Brandon Sanderson. That was one of his secret projects. Happy Place by Emily Henry. How have I not read that? How have I not read that? I put Funny Story on my like TBR on Goodreads. I was like, how can you even put that on here without reading Happy Place? It's literally sitting on my shelf right there. Like, how have I not read that? I don't understand. And then one of the big books that I want to get into this year that I'm very scared to say that I want to read is the Stormlight Archive by Brandon Sanderson. I want to get into the series. I really want to get into it. And I think I can't remember what the first book is right now, but Words of Radiance, is that the first book? Does she even know? I want to read the series, okay? I really want to get into it and see what all the hype is about. I know everybody that loves Brandon loves those books, and I want to know more about the Cosmere and all the things I'm missing. So I feel like I need to get more into it. Besides that, that is going to be my year in review for 2023. Maybe next year I come here and I have 50 books to tell you about and not 35. That would be so cool, but I do have other existing things going on, so you never really know. But I hope that this gave you some motivation and inspiration to read next year. I hope that this gave you some insight on what's worth your time and what's not. And let me know below in the comments if you guys liked any of these books, if you disagree with me on my ratings, if you thought any of them were wrong, or you want to talk about your opinion. I would love to hear it. But I love you guys so much, and I will see you in the next video. Please subscribe to the channel. Could really use that.